And let's also get the thoughts of my next guest. As I say, the former UK ambassador to Iran from 2003 to 2006, Sir Richard Dalton, joins us now. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Do you think that we will join any US attack on Iran if that happens, and do you think we should?
No, I don't think we will, because Mr. Starmer has recently had it stated on his behalf that he will observe international law, and an American attack, like the Israeli attack, would be an illegal aggression. There was no justification for a preemptive attack within the terms of international law because the threat was not imminent. There was no Iranian dash for a bomb. There was no sword at Israel's throat, which was the language Israel used to use to justify their self-defense action, and everybody would support them if indeed the sword was at their throat, in the sense that Iran was planning a nuclear or conventional attack. But Iran was not. So as I understand law, use of Diego Garcia or British bases for supporting B-2 bombers with bunker busters to attack Iran would be an illegal act. We would be declaring war on a country, and our own facilities would thereby legitimately be subject to self-defense retaliation by Iran.
Now, as you will know, there are many different interpretations of not just law, domestic law, but international law. I know that it's been reported, although not confirmed, that Lord Hermer, the Attorney General appointed by Keir Starmer to this government, has apparently advised that he believes Britain could not get involved on those international war grounds. But you're saying this is your view, that the Israeli attack was illegal under international law?
No, it's an absolutely clear position, and so far the British government has avoided commenting on it because it would be inconvenient to do so, because it would annoy President Trump.
Well, would it not also annoy some of our European allies?
The British government has said also that there is no military solution to this issue, that there is no way of ending Iran's nuclear program by military means, and that diplomacy is required. That was a clear statement 4 days ago in Parliament by the British Foreign Secretary. And if they follow through on that policy, which I think they are now trying to do in meetings with the Iranian Foreign Minister tomorrow in Geneva, then that would suggest to me strongly that they're not willing to break international law by invading or bombing or assisting others to bomb Iran.
I genuinely don't think that David Lammy's assessment of things is usually the strongest and most valid assessment of any situation from my previous experience with him. Saying there's no military solution to a hostile nation state that has said that they want to annihilate not just Israel, but also the big state in the US and the little state in the UK. And they have been developing nuclear weapons. Even the IAEA, the International Atomic Agency, has said they now have enriched uranium to a point where it's got no possible use in any domestic nuclear energy production. It's can only be used in the military. They've made it very clear. And they've said they are in breach, for the first time in 20 years, clear breaches of their responsibilities under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Given that they've said they want to annihilate Israel, they want to annihilate the US and Britain, and let's face it, the West, and they are developing a weapon that if they did get to the point where it was able to be used, not just Israel, but the world would be at risk. And given that this government is run by insane Islamic fundamentalists, including Ayatollah Khamenei, I would have thought it was really bleeding obvious that the solution was a military one, not a diplomatic one, and that they must be stopped.
Yes, and no doubt the Pope has fathered 100 children. I mean, you are making quite absurd exaggerations about Iran. Iran is not a country that is capable, as in your words, of destroying the West, of destroying the United States. Iran has no nuclear weapons program. That is the finding of the US.
Why are they enriching uranium into a military level?
That is the finding of the US intelligence community as lately as a published document in March, which I think everybody trying to analyze this situation needs to read. and no evidence has emerged subsequently of any weaponization activity that would justify the kind of language that you are using.
Why would
and the
Israel?
kind of
Why would
reasoning
Israel
which
do what they've
Israel-
done if they
because
didn't believe?
They have had a plan for decades to attack Iran because Iran is an enemy of Israel, which is wrong. Nobody endorses the refusal of Iran to recognize the state of Israel. Iran's rhetoric about Israel is foul and has created this pseudo justification for an attack on it. But you still have to look at the wording of international law if you wish other countries to respect international law in their dealings with you. That is the matter of basic self-interest in the survival of the United Kingdom, that you can't pick and choose and say other countries should observe international law when it comes to us or when it comes to causes we disapprove of.
I find
Ukraine, but that we won't hold them to that standard in causes that we do approve of.
I'm sorry, but okay, at what point does Israel, you say, well, you know, Israel seems to think this and it's unjustified. Iran has said they want to annihilate Israel. They are clearly building a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's quite...
No, they are not clearly building a nuclear weapon. What is your evidence? You have no such evidence.
The IEA has said they're enriching uranium to a military grade level. Why would they be doing that? What possible reason? Well, they're going to give it away at birthday parties? What are they going to do it for?
Are you a serious person or not? The fact is, you need to understand the context of this long dispute.
I do understand the context of this long dispute.
It goes back to 2003, and there has been a campaign of sanctions against Iran. There was a perfectly satisfactory nuclear deal which was trashed by the United States in 2018, and yet more oppression and suffering experienced amongst the Iranian people. Now, rightly or wrongly, the Iranians chose to exert leverage to get back into a negotiation under which their intentions not to develop nuclear weapons would be validated once more. And they chose as a means of pressure this enrichment of uranium beyond the level that they need for their civil nuclear programs. That is the reason they've been enriching.
I genuinely, I'm quite stunned, Sir Richard, by your willingness to to believe the Iranian mullahs and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard over others. But we are
talking. I'm believing U.S. intelligence estimates that Iran has not taken a decision to develop nuclear weapons. Now, President Trump is seeking to set that aside.
To have the capability.
But it still remains
They want to have the capability to do so. But they've also been funding, quite separately, they've also been funding Hamas, who attacked Israel, Hezbollah, who attacked Israel on October the 8th after the attack in 23, the Houthi rebels who've been attacking international shipping and attempting to send bombs to Israel in the last year or so. They have been funding pretty much all of the Middle East terrorism and much terrorism even on our shores as well. They are clearly a state that has no... You know, it's certainly not. Iran is, and the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people. The Iranian regime is certainly not one that is widely welcomed in the Middle East. And there will be many political leaders and even dictators in the Middle East who, whatever they say publicly for the benefit of their own people, are secretly rather pleased that Israel has dealt with this threat, hopefully once and for all.
That is your allegation, but those states in the Gulf and elsewhere have all condemned Israel's action. They are terrified of the anarchy that would flow from realizing Israel's intention to destroy the Islamic regime. Also, you and others who advocate war have forgotten the lessons of Afghanistan and Iraq.
You've forgotten the lessons of Syria, I would say.
How did those end up?
No, how did Syria end up?
Disaster.
How did Syria end up, sir?
Well, we weren't involved in Syria.
Exactly. And how did Syria end up? You think I'm forgetting Iraq and Afghanistan?
What's the point you're making?
We got involved in those wars, and there was a lot of chaos and death and destruction that came out of them. We didn't get involved in Syria. A lot of chaos and death and destruction came out of Syria. Whether we get involved or not. You say I'm an advocate for war. I'm not an advocate for war. I'm an advocate for peace. But Israel...
No, you're not. You're endorsing attacking Iran.
I'm endorsing Israel's ability, and our only ally that is a democracy in the Middle East, ability to be kept safe from the threat of Iran.
Israel is kept safe from the threat of Iran by its overwhelming conventional military dominance. Secondly, by its nuclear deterrence, the possession of 90 nuclear warheads. And thirdly, by the American security umbrella. As the interview with former Prime Minister of Israel, Olmert, a few weeks ago made absolutely clear, Israel is fundamentally a secure state. Now, it is subject to military threats. I'm not denying that, and those threats are wrong. But we are entitled to question the means which Israel and the United States choose to deal with those threats. Because, as those failed military interventions, which I mentioned, show, that you can start a war, but it's bloody difficult to end it on satisfactory terms. And one of the risks, of course, is that if a nuclear state like Israel and another one like the United States attacks a non-nuclear state like Iran, what is going to happen to the nuclear non-proliferation regime? Both Iran and many other countries are going to conclude that they need nuclear weapons too.
As many have. But that's the trouble, isn't it? Because that's the conclusion of the likes of Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And he was able to get nuclear weapons. And now he's untouchable because of it, which is why it's very important to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
And the way to do that is by the resumption of diplomacy, which, thank God, at the 11th hour, the British government and others appear to be trying. Now, I don't know why you smirk at me like that when I talk about potential peaceful solutions.
I don't think there is a potential peaceful solution with mad Islamic fundamentalists who want the death and destruction of Israel, America and Britain.
They are realistic people. The Islamic Republic has a mission in the world, whether we like it or not, and they know perfectly well that they are subject to annihilation by Israel. Which is why they keep funding attacks on Israel. If they're subject to annihilation by Israel, if they launch any form of nuclear attack on... Why should Israel take that risk? On Israel, they are deterred. Why should Israel take that risk? We wouldn't take that risk if it was us, if it was an ally, if it was a state near us. I mean, they're not the neighbouring state, we know. But if we face the same sort of threat, existential threat, we would act, and we have done in the past. There is no existential threat from Iran to Israel at present. At present. So how close does it have to be for it to be acceptable to you that Israel should act? I think I go back to this statement that so many Israelis themselves make, which is that we have a right to attack when the sword is at our throat. That is not my language. That is Israeli military and strategic thinking. And that is what they used to say when they weren't under this present extremist government. And everybody, including me, would support them in that event. So nobody is trying to deprive Israel of its right of self-defense. We're simply saying that it's in Israel's interest and the interest of the rest of the world to do so in accordance with international law. All right. Now, sir, I didn't ask you about this in advance, so I absolutely accept your right to not stay on the line. But I have Philip Ingram, MBE, who's a former senior military intelligence officer in the studio. Would it be okay if he put some points to you for you to respond? If you choose not to, that's absolutely fine, because I didn't have a chance to ask you about that before the interview. You agreed to an interview with me. No, but would you be willing? By all means. Great, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Philip Ingram, I know you've been itching to get involved, so do have your say.
Yeah, Sir Richard, there's a few things in what you've been saying. Existential threat by Iran to Israel. Iran's sponsorship of Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, who have been attacking Israel on a daily basis, would constitute an existential threat. The interpretation of an immediate threat when we're looking at things from a nuclear perspective, do you wait until there's a nuclear warhead? Do you wait until the nuclear warhead is attached to a delivery device? Or do you wait till that nuclear warhead has been fired and explodes over a target before you take it as an immediate threat? So that's an interpretation. We've been trying to separate military activity from diplomacy. Military activity, war is diplomacy by other means. It's setting the conditions where diplomacy has failed, and you're setting the conditions to get back to diplomacy again. It's not done in isolation. Donald Trump has set his conditions out. We've got the meetings between the European leaders that are going to happen that will continue that diplomacy. But if Iran continues to reject the diplomatic approaches, something else has to happen. And military is part of that wider diplomacy. These are the issues that I have with it.
OK. Sir Richard Dalton, do you want to respond?
Well, of course, diplomacy has two sides, and the Americans have rejected Iranian attempts at diplomacy, and we have a deadlock at the 6th round of talks. Now, anybody who's dealt with Iran over a long period knows that these issues are intensely complex, and the way you provide proper assurance that Iran will never have the ability to divert nuclear materials for military purposes is through a very complex series of limitations and monitoring and supervision. Now, that is within the capability of the international community to reinstate. And Mr. Trump himself, shortly before the Israeli attack, was saying that the diplomacy had promise. So to suggest that somehow the deadlock a week or two ago was a deadlock forever, and that the world community as a whole, including Israel and the United States, couldn't be satisfied with something different, is simply wrong and dangerous. Now, Israel, of course, is very skeptical of the international diplomatic endeavors.
I wonder why.
From their attempt to sabotage the JCPOA, which everybody else agreed was working to achieve the objective of ensuring Iran never had a nuclear weapon. But unless you are basically welcoming the kind of chaos and destruction and suffering that war brings, diplomacy must be given a further chance.
Okay. What about, just finally, on a slightly different note, you're talking about, obviously, yeah, the concern is, you topple Saddam Hussein, you get chaos in Iraq, you topple the Taliban in Afghanistan. That didn't work out too well. They're back in power, even stronger than ever. But there is obviously risk in toppling the Iranian leadership. However, Iran is a different country, much larger, much more sort of established structures in that country than both of those countries. There is also the concern for the people living under the Iranian regime right now, particularly women, subjugated, girls beaten, even murdered for not even covering their heads properly. Many in the Iranian population desperately wanting to be freed from the Iranian regime and the rule of the Revolutionary Guard. What about that argument?
It's not up to outsiders to do it. It happens to be against the law. And everybody in positions of authority in the countries you admire say that it's for the people of Iran to change their own government. Now, at the present, the effect of these attacks has been to deaden opposition to the regime, because everybody is trying to survive and they are rallying to their country, which is under attack. Now, when the dust has settled, maybe things will be different. Who can say? But the idea that creating the kind of destruction that you advocate in order to change a regime of a country like that should be an acceptable war aim of a country like the United Kingdom is utterly misguided.
OK. I mean, personally, I think we have a moral duty to free subjugated people, but I'm old-fashioned like that. So, Richard Dalton, absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Really appreciate you joining us. Former UK ambassador to Iran, 2003 to 2006.